gtUSDa sits a layer above and makes these allocation decisions subject to the methodology of the vault. In DeFi right now, risk is ever present and it needs to be monitored as well. So let's consider a scenario where we see an exploit on a BTC wrapper here within the USDC vault. Hey everyone, I'm Carson Brown, Senior Product Manager at Gauntlet, and I'm here today to talk about Gauntlet USDC Alpha, or gtUSDa. gtUSDa is our premier USDC vault that rebalances across multiple different lending strategies across different chains, risk profiles, and stablecoin assets. As I mentioned, gtUSDa primarily allocates across lending positions, and therefore, to kick things off, I'm just going to do a quick high-level overview of lending in DeFi. If we think about lending, we have two different things of consideration here. We have our supply, which I'll label as S. We have our collateral, which I'll label as C. What is happening in lending is supplied assets are lent to users who are borrowing against their collateral, and those borrowers borrowing against that collateral are paying interest back to the suppliers. Within DeFi, we have two primary models here. This will be our a pooled model, which is similar to an Aave or a compound, where collateral assets are also lent out. And then we have an isolated model, which is where Gauntlet is most active as a curator on platforms like Morpho. Within an isolated lending market, we have multiple markets that supply is lent out against. So I'll consider USDC as our supply in a vault, and then we'll have multiple markets. Each market is a collateral and debt pair. So this would be our BTC collateral, we'll have ETH collateral, and then we'll have, say, a yield-bearing stablecoin like staked cUSD. What Gauntlet as a curator is doing on a Morpho vault is allocating USDC from this supply to these different collateral markets. And how these allocation decisions are made is always based on liquidity of the position. When we allocate to a position, we want to have a high degree of confidence that we'll be able to receive that USDC as well as the accrued interest. While most borrowed assets are repaid by users repaying their debt, the other route for positions to be repaid is going to be through liquidations. And a lot of the risk management that we are doing is always monitoring the liquidation health. Liquidation health is influenced by a multitude of factors, but in general, let's consider a price chart here. And we'll consider a price chart in a drawdown scenario where a collateral price is dropping. We'll have two lines of consideration here. We'll have a blue line, which represents the line at which in the collateral drawdown, we see a liquidation, and we'll see a red line here just below it. This red line represents the profitable range for a collateral asset to be liquidated. What we are always managing and looking into is based on a drawdown, if a position is liquidated, will that liquidation always remain profitable? Essentially, will the price remain within this range where both blue line and red line are constantly moving up and down? And this is what we're monitoring in the space. Now let's take a step beyond into Gauntlet USD Alpha or gtUSDa, because this kind of takes it a layer above. As I had mentioned, we have a vault that is lending to different markets, but in reality, Gauntlet as a curator is running over 40 different stablecoin vaults across different supply assets, chains, and risk profiles. So let's now consider three vaults here. We have, let's say we have USDC on ETH. We have USDT on ETH, and we have USDC on Base. And each of these vaults are going to be coming with a different kind of risk parameters that we are managing. Let's say the USDC vault on ETH is yielding 3% and is 100% liquid, which means we can withdraw 100% of our position if we deposit. USDT could be yielding 3.5%, also 100% liquid, but let's say there's a 50 bips round trip cost. If we're in USDC and we're swapping into USDT, we are incurring an immediate execution cost. And so we need to account for that there. And then let's say for USDC on base, we're yielding 7%, but we're 20% liquid. And we have a 15-minute bridge time. How do we allocate across these three markets? For a user who is coming in looking for a target yield profile and a target liquidity profile, that point in time decision can be, easy. I want high yield. I'm going to have the position open for a long time, so an immediate execution cost is no issue. So I'll go to USDT. Or, liquidity, I have a small position, or, I'm comfortable with the liquidity risk. I'll go to USDC on base for a higher yield. That being said, all of these parameters here are quite volatile in the market. A 100% liquid vault can change in liquidity profile quite quickly. We can see massive shifts in execution cost. So it might have been 50 bips from USDC to USDT, but we see a liquidity drawdown on the secondary liquidity, and that now is 1%. And generally, this requires a lot of constant monitoring. Now, this is where gtUSDa comes in. gtUSDa sits a layer above and makes these allocation decisions subject to the methodology of the vault. What is my target yield profile? What is my target liquidity profile? And how do I constantly monitor my execution costs and my trade sizing to make sure I'm responding to these changing dynamics appropriately? Now, the other big element of consideration here is risk. Obviously, in DeFi right now, risk is ever present, and it needs to be monitored as well. So let's consider a scenario where we see an exploit on a BTC wrapper here within the USDC vault. Let's say it's in the USDC vault on base, bridge exploit or something like that. So what happens in these instances? When we see a risk event happen on chain, this smooth price chart ends up actually taking a very steep drawdown into the unprofitable zone of liquidation. What that means is that the funds lent out to this collateral asset have a low probability of being repaid or liquidated because the liquidation itself is no longer profitable. What this means is generally the vault and the users will begin withdrawing from this vault. And while we end up seeing withdrawals from the ETH and staked USD market coming out smoothly, the funds in the BTC market end up getting stuck. What this means is for users who withdraw quickly, they may be able to get their position out, but that means that the exposure to the toxic position ends up increasing in concentration over time. Now, when we're allocated across multiple vaults, we have exposure to multiple markets. But what gtUSDa is able to do, let's say again that this USDC vault is the one where we've seen the risk event, we're able to proactively identify these exploits on chain and withdraw as soon as possible. What this means is as we're able to transition the entire strategy to exiting positions, we're able to take advantage of liquidity as it becomes available, and we're able to automatically do that until the entire position is closed. So why is it helpful to work with Gauntlet? The most beneficial position that Gauntlet has in the market is full operational efficiency and visibility from top to bottom in the stack. That means we are allocating the markets operated by Gauntlet, and the gtUSDa strategy itself is operating a layer above with the same team involved no matter what. That means for an aggregation strategy, allocating to underlying strategies where we still have full visibility into underlying risk and operations, we get the benefit of being able to adapt the strategy to the underlying operations of the vault. And in case of a risk event, we're able to understand the response plan early of the vault to make sure we are adjusting the allocation strategy in response to that as well. For anyone interested in learning more, go head over to gauntlet.xyz. Don't hesitate to reach out with any questions you might have. Thank you.